By God's decree and command, the king was rendered insane for 7 years, where he lost his humanity completely, becoming like a wild beast for 7 years, crawling on all fours like a maniac. Going through withdrawals from his addiction to power, being weaned off his cruel lion nature gradually. The withdrawals from his addiction made him go mad, until the lion within his heart finally tamed. But when the king got too prideful and high on himself, God plucked his wings and the king was removed from his throne. The king was addicted to his notoriety in Babylon. It was a tree of pride that God was removing with a painful surgery. The spirit of Babylon takes root in the man's heart.
Every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them. And the Holy One came down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, Hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit.
In the king's dream, all that was left was the stump from the evil tree. God commands that it be left as a memorial to the king's evil pride. The king planted an evil tree of misery. The roots of that tree would live on after him.
Could that memorial stump signify the foundations of Babylon surviving in Iraq today? Iraq is rooted directly to Babylon.
The king was addicted to Babylon like an addiction to evil fruit in the Garden of Eden. The king's evil heart was cast into the stump, separating him from his addiction and freeing him from his dependency on notoriety and high pride. Though this was a dream and highly symbolic, it was a dream from the Lord. The king saw a wet mist come up from the earth and baptize him. He then dreamt that he grew eagle feathers coming out from the old roots of his political wings God had plucked off. The eagle wings signify a spiritual transformation from captivity to true freedom.
The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws.
And the king praised God for setting him free, and he became a new king with a new heart. Since Daniel established Nebuchadnezzar as the great head of the Gentile family tree, were the Gentiles in the last days going to change into free eagles also? Wasn't the king a puppet for latter-day prophecy being fulfilled today? What about the stump? Why did God command it to be watered and preserved in the earth? Why dedicate the ground and its roots for no future purpose? Is a stump not a preservation of life lasting far into the Gentiles' future? A time capsule for future fruition in the latter days? What does a watered stump become eventually?
Is in there?
Daniel the prophet records a powerful clue given to him by God. A preserved watered stump is a prophecy fulfilled when Iraq is later transformed into a bush of freedom in the latter days. Since Nebuchadnezzar grew eagle's wings, is Iraq to be transformed into a free eagle after being delivered by the symbol of a bush, paralleling the Israelites' path to freedom? The single and most important clue regarding the stump was God's command to bind the stump with iron and brass rings.
Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven.
Binding the stump would prohibit the stump from becoming a freed bush until far into the future. In other words, postponing freedom for Iraq until the last days, when a modern bush would be allowed to transform the stump after freeing it from captive roots and allowing the heart of an eagle to replace the evil lion's nature. perfectly matching the same transformation Nebuchadnezzar experienced, being changed from a lion nature to a free eagle. This is a perfect type and shadow prophecy for today. Daniel makes it clear that the king is only a puppet for the Gentiles in the last days. The Gentiles later escaped captivity by fleeing to America, which became their new eagle wings, or a symbol of freedom from a king. So, in the last days, America gained its freedom of worship by standing up to King George and the European religious Babylon. Just as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood up to King Nebuchadnezzar for their religious freedom, so, in the last days, America gained its freedom of worship by standing up to King George and the European religious Babylon.
Amazing beyond words is the fact that England borrowed the symbol of the lion from Babylon. So in the last days, you literally have Gentiles changing from a lion to an eagle through great suffering, paralleling Nebuchadnezzar's painful withdrawal and transformation, changing from a lion to an eagle nature when they established the United States of America.
The two trees in the garden represent free people who seek God's Zion and captive people who are enslaved by the spirit of Babylon. Tower of Babel and King Nebuchadnezzar's golden image represent Satan's tree, where man seeks to reach heaven and paradise by building a man-made political system using earthly wealth and power. The trees are hollow and lifeless, producing the fruit which brings spiritual death. God cuts both of these trees down to scatter the human branches away from unification of death for a counterfeit tree of life. Daniel the prophet makes it very clear in chapter 8 that towers and high horns represent the political leader who is elevated to the height of a deity, and people worship the government, which is the domain of the leader who represents the highest horn. This very same pattern was common in our day, as dictators often are venerated by palaces with horns that reach to heaven. Worshipping a government becomes another Tower of Babel, or a tree producing evil fruit. There are two sides to Babylon. Spiritual Babylon is a corruption of men's hearts through false worship. A physical Babylon is the actual corrupt government or evil tree itself. King Nebuchadnezzar dealt with spiritual Babylon within his own heart. His son Belshazzar, however, refused to repent, and Babylon itself was destroyed, along with Belshazzar the king being executed. The great head and horn was wounded to death. Babylon was to become like a stump in the earth, being preserved alive, but unfruitfully bound until 7 kingdoms within 4 world empires passed over it. There must be a parallel match in the last days, where the lion, Nebuchadnezzar, and the young lion, Nebuchadnezzar's son, are restored in a parallel type of prophecy when the head wound is healed. It becomes world news when Saddam Hussein rebuilds the city of Babylon right on top of the ancient foundations of old Babylon. He even rebuilds Nebuchadnezzar's palace, spending billions of dollars. Adjacent to Nebuchadnezzar's palace, Saddam builds a second palace to himself, glorifying his name as the man who restored Babylon in our day. He is declared in the media to be Nebuchadnezzar II, as if he were the son of Nebuchadnezzar brought back to life in our day. The young lion wounded to death was restored again. Saddam Hussein sought to invade Kuwait in order to gain the world's oil supply and bring the world to its knees under a new Babylon. But a bush and an eagle came to stop him, again with a parallel type today.
This is definitely a clue about a bush transforming Iraq. I'm just a little irritated that other ministers haven't failed to make this known.
It was amazing how Saddam Hussein actually resembled a lion. Members of his family say that his nature was like a lion, making people afraid as he passed.